Hi, it's Jasmine. You know, that girl who did you-know-what way before the internet ever existed. Join me and my special guest every week as we talk about anything and everything because nothing is too taboo. So punch your ticket and get on board the crazy train with me, Jasmine St. Clair. All aboard!
Welcome to a new episode of Crazy Train with Jasmine St. Clair. Thank you so much for tuning in again. This week's guest is a very special one, but before I get into it, please do not forget to rate and review Crazy Train with Jasmine on Apple iTunes. And also subscribe to my YouTube page, subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes and Spotify. But most importantly, if you would like to hear very let's say controversial and never heard before interviews, never seen before, get a membership to my YouTube page. Get a membership. It's so worth it. There's also a live chat sometimes, live streams onto YouTube. So check it out. It's Crazy Train Podcast on YouTube as well. We're in this era where it's kind of righteous to be a victim. And people become a victim because they want to feel relevant or important, not knowing that it could possibly ruin someone's life. Now, not all victims have a vagina. I know some people may hate me for saying that, but everyone deserves to have their part of a story heard. And then it's up to you to judge them. Or actually, it's up to other people to judge them, such as God or whoever their higher being is. But with that said, I feel as though there's too much sloppy documentary filmmaking. When I saw A Dangerous Breed, that documentary filmmaker seemed like he was out for something else and pushing to make Teddy Hart the bad person. Now, I've known Teddy for quite some time, and actually, I think he made a cute little outfit for me years ago. Okay, maybe he goes to his own, rhythm and does things on his own, but doesn't make him a murderer. It does not make him a bad person. We all make mistakes in life, and I'm sure I could find something on each and every single one of you out there if I wanted to, but I don't do that. I judge people on the way they treat me and not by some documentary filmmaker who seemed like he was either probably trying to get laid or just to make someone look bad. And this is how it appeared. In any case, who takes the accountability for Teddy Hart's career now? Nobody wants to hire him. Is it the documentary filmmaker? Is it the production company? I want you to listen to the interview with an open mind and an open heart. Maybe open legs. No, just an open mind. And let me know what you think. Here's Teddy Hart. What's your ethnic background? Because you look exotic.
Greek. I think we're Greek, Sicilian, Russian, Welsh, and Scottish, I think, is what we are, the parts. And my mom's Greek, my dad's Italian, Russian, and I think we're like kind of like a mix, though, too.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, I got to ask you this because I know that I always bring this promo up. Okay, so the Feinstein incident, that was really funny with the promo that they cut from yours to do the honorable thing. But when you did the one promo, I'm going to turn you into my prostitutes. I don't know which show you were at, but your promos are so funny and so natural. Did you actually practice everything, or I think you're just a natural. That's just me.
I just tried to keep it on the fly. Like I always thought of it as like a rapper. Like if you have an interview that you need to write down and cut, that's because you'll be on WWE TV type of thing, and you know who you're going to be working long term, and you know the gimmick and the angle and what you can say. But most of those interviews for the indies, I thought were more fun if they were on the fly, like a shoot interview on the fly kind of. So I would just, I had bullet points in my head that I thought were good. My kind of thing was a lot of those guys were stale and the indie guys were coming up. The newer guys wanted to do all this stuff and a whole bunch of moves. And the lazy fucking fat guys wanted to sit around and hold the headlock. And so we were at a crossroads at at that time and place of who was going to push the envelope into, they always say less is more in wrestling, but when you're trying to get a job as an indie wrestler, that doesn't really work. You want to get as much in as you can. That's also the way you train and learn stuff. So if you're doing, football practices and you got a big game coming up, that's obviously not going to kill yourself in the practice. But the practice for us, that's the only game we have, was going to the indie shows. There wasn't no other options. Most of us that took that indie circuit, we took it as like kind of a crash course and figuring these moves out and what you could do and what you couldn't do. Because the last thing you want to do is hurt somebody with these moves you're trying to do. Or cutting a promo is one thing. I'd like it to be somewhat true. If it hurts a little bit because it's true, then you can dig in on somebody personally. But most of the promos were, from my thing, was trying to point out the athleticism of me and the lack of training and preparation for these other guys. As an athlete, wrestling was supposed to be a sport. I looked at it as a sport, not just a show. So I always wanted some realistic guy. If the guys were training, a lot of guys are smaller now, which is completely fine, but they still go to the gym and they still do, all of the necessary practice stuff to wrestle at a safe pace and safe style and be innovative. And I think we pushed the envelope, especially back in the day. There was probably 6 of us that really pushed the envelope. I talk about Sanjay Dutt was one of them. Ruckus was one of them. AJ Styles was one of them. Like Paul London was one of them. Spanky, American Dragon. There was a few indie guys that were in Japan that were coming up that were unbelievable. But there was a group of us, Jack Evans, myself, that were just, and Amazing Red. I got to make sure to mention him too, because they invented a lot of the moves and invented the style. So that was something we focused on for years, to be the most innovative wrestlers in the world. And then somebody had to back it up on the mic and take it on the chin from all the guys. And that was I was delegated to be the guy that got in shit for doing anything and everything. So I was usually the guy that took the whipping boy, that took the blame for pointing out the obvious, that fans didn't want to see this shit. And they blame it on psychology and they say it's entertaining, when I didn't think the fans were cheering that much. And from what I saw, I thought was a fairly honest depiction of what the audience wanted to see. They wanted to see fast-paced, movie-style, Matrix-style fighting scenes and athletics and acrobatic stuff that nobody was going to do in the world. And that you'd absolutely know after that show that guy was close to being in a wheelchair. He really risked his life for you, and he did everything he could to make sure you walked away with that satisfaction and feeling of wanting to keep coming back to that show and support that federation, which includes all the guys in that federation. So I always thought about it as a football team. I don't get to be the quarterback, and nobody really likes when Teddy Hart comes into town because he's the measuring stick. But the fans that are there definitely appreciate when you see a high quality wrestler who's what they say a special attraction, because they bring me in from another country and they spend a lot of money compared to what they're paying these guys normally, $50, $100. My pay would be considerably more than that back in the day. So the respect level was that I was in your building and I'd make sure the fans came back to see your show. But it's not my show. I didn't grow up with the promoter. I didn't grow up in the territory. I wasn't training with those guys. So the cliques were always weird with me for indie wrestling cliques. If you're in Ring of Honor, you had a group of guys that were there before I was there. If you're in CZW, they were there before I was there. So it would have been like guys coming from the States to Canada. And if they came to Calgary, they would have came to Stampede Wrestling. And then it would have been me and TJ and Harry and Jack and Jay, Hotshot Johnny Devine, guys like that, making the decisions on what they wanted to do. So I always had to come in and walk on eggshells in some capacity, also keep my confidence and my mystique. And it got confused for being arrogant a lot of the times when I really thought I was a nice guy and I was humble and I tried to go out of my way to interact with the guys. But you have an hour or two before a show to interact, plus remember a whole match you got to go out there and do. And then after that, usually go back to the hotel and catch the flight back home to Canada, which is like a 10-hour flight with customs. And so point about the promos, I know I go all over the place, but yeah, I considered myself one of the best promo guys for actually realistically talking about the business as a shoot and as a work at the same time, and trying to incorporate that line. And fans are starting to get pretty smart, especially during maybe 10 years ago. They really started to know what was going on. They understood the chemistry between guys and the way moves were being done, and how a good move is supposed to look. So you get that holy shit chant, and that was my argument with a lot of the guys, that you could stack those moves one after another, after another, after another. And if you did it right, you'd have a huge ovation from the crowd, and which I thought created a value that you were able to get the fans to make some noise. And that was the measuring stick, or, that was the scale of how you decided if you were going to get to come back or not, or if the promoter was going to bring you back. So, and I think that mattered up until a certain point, and then it got to the point where the cancel culture and all the politics, the better you did and the more fans you got, the more of a threat you were to the little group of guys that were in that promotion. And if you weren't going to be a regular, bringing me in more than once was almost like giving somebody a free cheeseburger, and then they want to come back and get the free cheeseburger again, and they won't get it. So the less Teddy Hart, the better for a lot of the guys, because this is a competition sport where if I run the fastest, jump the highest, and fucking talk, back it up, then sometimes, it's taken wrong. And for that reason, I think even right now with the Joey Ryan situation, a lot of guys, I don't think you should be able to cancel somebody and take away their living based on secondhand stories. If the cops got us, that's one thing. Like Feinstein, I thought got away with murder on his situation, but he never got arrested either. So that happened.
Being chased down the street.
Yeah, but it's insane. But eventually he gets to come back. And, that's, to me, I was happy in some capacity that he got to come back, because I felt bad for anybody. People make mistakes, and it's a shitty mistake. That's a big one to make. I'm not forgiving or saying anything, but I live in a pretty open world there's a lot of crazy shit that happens out there. And I ask God the same as I ask, a brother or sister to have forgiveness and understanding and empathy. And if they can put themselves in that situation, it seems like people have gotten really cold and judgmental. And then if you peel back the onion, you look at some of the guys that are the ones pointing the fingers. They're the ones that actually have convictions for criminal records for spousal abuse or domestic violence or shit like that. And they're the ones throwing the punches and throwing the bricks, and they live in a glass house. And a lot of the times I didn't have time. Like after this is my first podcast after the WWE, the Peacock and whatever Bloomhouse fiasco that they pulled on me. So I didn't even really want to talk after. I won't say depressed, just disappointed in the way the world works, and that way you can say something without having any proof, just by adding the word supposedly or allegedly or maybe, or this was hypothetical. We're not sure if it actually happened, but there was this alien that landed on the moon and fucking blah, blah, blah. And they make it's like, it's absolutely complete bullshit. It's almost like from a fucking science fiction movie where you're watching somebody ruin somebody's life based on shit that never happened at all. And it's just somebody making it up. And then you got a forum to say it and three morons agree to it. And all of a sudden now that's fact. And I'm being judged for shit that never happened in my life,
Well, yeah, but with that said, it's a few things. Okay. So first of all, when I said this earlier, victims don't always have vaginas. To me, you're the victim. Like the second I saw those skanks in the beginning of it, I'm like, you know what? Something doesn't smell right. And it's not like from between their legs. It's just they don't smell right. Like it doesn't look right. Then I'd like to run a background check on the documentary filmmaker. That is what I would like to do. I would like my lawyer to go do that, which I'm going to have him do, because he needs accountability. He has to be held accountable, which we'll discuss it, privately, but he did sloppy documentary filmmaking.
Yeah, some of the worst you could do.
Exactly. And I don't know if he jacks off in his mother's basement or lives there with his cats or what he does, if he has whatever. And
the sad thing is about that, he has a wife and a daughter, and I was always nice to him because I knew he was trying to get. The thing with that documentary is I paid for most of that documentary myself to be done over the years. He never put money in. And so when he talks about that in the documentary, you have to remember, he's got the power of God. He's going back and picking and choosing anything he wants over 10 years that can make me look bad based on knowing the ending, what he wants. He knows the narrative. So there was 70 people interviewed for that thing over the years, over 10 years. Not one positive thing was said, not one. Everything that was positive. I think there was 50 people that they considered positive interviews. They had another 25 names of wrestlers and people that agreed that if they were going to be asked questions about Teddy Hart, they had a positive story or something nice to say. None of those interviews were done. And the 50 that were done in the past 10 years, none of them were shown. And so, I mean, the guy that really owns the footage, this is the complicated thing, was Fred, Fred Croach is a cameraman. So he stole the footage from the producer who he'd been working with and sold the footage behind that producer's back, and now is being sued by the original producer of the show, which was supposed to be called, Teddy Hart, Truth and Tribulations, or there was another one called Heart Attack. So when I was being talked to or brought back. This show is basically about if you were going to get off probation. I had 6-year probation. If I was going to be able to get that finished, what I planned on doing with my life, any businesses I was doing, workshops, wanting to go back to Canada, thinking about going to Lebanon or Dubai for wrestling schools, native reservations we work with in Canada, what'll happen when you can finally go back to Canada freely, because I haven't been home in 6 years. So including the girls charging me, I was facing 20 years in jail for those 2 girls. On my own accord, I went back willingly. No one forced me. I have a dual passport. No extradition law in Canada can come to the States and grab me. So I could stay in Canada. I could stay in the States for 30, 40 years. If I thought I did it, why would I go back and take a chance? Unless I absolutely knew that was bullshit. Most guys are going to say, you know what? There's 2 girls saying I sexually assaulted them and confined them. They must have a load of evidence. Obviously, they don't. And I know this because I have all the evidence. I have the hard drives. I have all of this stuff. All they did was file bankruptcy, keep all the property, and steal my money, which was involved any businesses I had with them, and my cats, which was a business that continues to grow. But that's my bread and butter, and that's also my heart and soul. The cats and the outfits meant more to me than the wrestling. I wrestled as a hobby since basically 2000. When I signed with WWE, it was 1998, and I was the youngest guy in the world to sign. And I already knew the schedule was really, really crazy, and that I was all by myself. By the time I got up there, Owen was doing the Blue Blazer gimmick, and he was quite upset with the direction it was going. He was having problems with his wife at home. His marriage, I wouldn't say it was falling apart, but it was definitely being strained based on him working with Deborah. And I think WWE knew that at the time, that it was some kind of punishment almost, because they knew that Owen's wife was vocal, as she's obviously been for the last 15 or 20 years, completely against and hard to work with. And nobody really gets to properly enjoy Owen Hart being a WWE Hall of Fame or Owen Hart old matches. You know, there's not a lot of stuff out there because of all the shit with the lawsuits and stuff. But that situation, I kind of realized after Brett punched Vince that my career would probably never be what it was supposed to be. And I felt terrible for Harry and TJ and Natty and Jack and anyone that came from the dungeon, because we went from being untouchable to basically blackballed. And anyone that came from our company or our group was in that same boat as being blackballed. And thank God Jericho and Chris Benoit didn't suffer that much from that situation. But everybody else that had anything to do with the Hearts was basically jobbed out or never given an opportunity to do anything. And I'd say that Tyson Kidd and Natalia made the absolute best of their situation, because those two are very smart workhorses, and they didn't complain, and they're not political, and they just shut their mouth and played the game. And that's how they stayed up there. And I think it was also, they needed somebody still to collect all the money from the Hart family revenue for, you know, the archives, all the video stuff, all of the royalty check stuff like that. The Hart name still carries a big weight. So Natalia put it on her shoulders and carried a 5,000-pound fucking monkey across the desert with TJ, who broke his neck and still shut his mouth, played ball, ended up getting back into a situation where he's directly working with Vince McMahon, which was a dream of his. And he respected Vince more so much than the company. I think he respected Vince the most because we'd grown up with Vince as like a father figure because of what Brett had been through. And my grandfather was also a huge fan of Vince McMahon's, because our family had worked with the McMahons for 3 generations. People forget it wasn't just a one generation, wasn't one thing. They'd worked together for years and years, 50 years or 60 years, something like that. They'd been working together. So when that happened, I kind of thought for sure Brett was the guy I wanted to be working with and under his blanket of protection, because he was very smart and very political, and he was there for the longest period of time. Him and Sean, that was like a power struggle between the two lions, you know, in the jungle. And Triple H and Sean and those guys played the game, and they ended up winning. And Brett had to deal with that. But after that, Brett's soldiers are us. We're coming up after that, and there's no leader for us to count on. And he's going through terrible shit. His brother dying, a stroke, a divorce. And then watching a lot of his friends die on TV over the next few years, because that was kind of at that time, a lot of people were falling off. A lot of people were passing away in wrestling. If you look at all the deaths that were in that year, or not in that year, but in that 10-year period of time, it was astonishing how many guys we lost. Right. And I think that just overall, that impact took away from the business, and it took away from the type of people that were being hired. And a lot of the alpha male, big, strong, kind of loud, cocky characters that were real life guys, they got shifted into more of a quiet, subservient video game playing guy that was willing to just basically do exactly, and that's fine. I understand doing what you're told completely also though, but you have to have some sense of where you want to go independently and what your character wants to be, because the guy writing the character in the back generally is not as aware of what's going to get over as the guy doing it himself. I would have to think that probably The Rock did most of his own stuff and knew what he was going to do. And I would think that probably Shawn Michaels did most of his own stuff. There wasn't guys running Brett's stuff. I think those guys ran their own matches and had their own image, and they did what they wanted to do along the lines of what their character, in their heart, they believed that that character was all about. And I think the characters in wrestling now, me being a character and a shoot at the same time, it confused people. And it rubbed people the wrong way. And I feel terrible. If I could go back in time and massage things easier rather than coming in and doing things a certain way. I just didn't realize the approach to the business. And I didn't realize how touchy people were and temperamental, and how many backstabbers and guys that just talk a lot of shit, because that's just the way of this business. It's not a team sport. Again, if my stats depended on how much you got paid, and if I scored 100 touchdowns, the team wins, then everyone on the team loves me. And that's a real sport. And we all make money off victories. We all make money off of success. In wrestling, there's no victories and there's really no success unless you're friends with a promoter or you're friends with one of the bookers, and you're part of a certain group of guys and they protect their own guys. And again, me being from Canada was just the wrong place at the wrong time. And then being from the Hart family, I think was the worst family you could be blessed with having. Usually it would be a huge name and a huge feather under your cap, but to be there as a fan watching Davey and Brett and Owen and Jim and the Hart Foundation and Brian Pillman on top, and then 2 years later you're there and they're all gone, and Owen's pissed off with the situation, and they're telling me that this is kind of the direction that they want my character to go in, and I'm 170 pounds going, shit, like I don't know what's going on. I came up here for a tryout thinking this was sort of just like thanks from Owen today. They're going to give you a tryout. It wasn't, nothing's going to probably come out of it. You're 170 pounds and the family's at war right now with WWE. But I went up there and had a 7-day or 10-day dojo and got a contract as the youngest guy in the world and surprised everybody. And that was some of the proudest times in my life. But when I realized, and I'm pretty sharp back then, of the schedule, it scared the shit out of me. And automatically then you're forced to take, at that size, they want you to jump. They're not going to say it. And I've always been politically correct with not blaming, but taking steroids publicly. And I guess now at that age, at 18, all of a sudden I'm forced, because I know there's a job out there, or there was a job offer. So I better get in shape and get as big as fast as I can. And then that becomes a never ending cycle. I've been on and off. I've had to take steroids on and off for 20 years, and I never took a lot. So I never had any of the damage or abuse from what they said steroids were so bad. But I mean, the accumulation of it for 20 years, when you become 35, your sex drive's terrible. And and that I always said, like, I live with multiple girls and they have me like I'm some predator I'm forcing sex on. I call myself like a fixed cat, where obviously I'm going to perform if I have to. I'm an athlete, like it's like dancing, but I wasn't out there trying to fuck the whole world. I always was nice to those girls. I considered more of a teacher and a trainer, and because of chemical drug addiction on most of the people that I know, I never did those drugs. So that was something that I was considered like a lifeguard. So a lot of girls would hang out with me because I didn't drink alcohol and I wasn't doing coke and I wasn't doing meth. And if I was doing fun drugs, then I would say marijuana is a fun drug. I'd say mushrooms are a fun drug. I would say if you're going to go to a rave, you did ecstasy, it's a fun drug. Guys all want to lie and bullshit, but I watched half the guys smoking crack and doing coke and hiding in their fucking closets and acting scared when I would see them off, or I would know their lifestyle, because at that stage it was connected. Everybody kind of what the wrestling scene was. And I'm glad the wrestling scene changed. I'm glad that they got a lot of cleaner guys and a better group of guys from what I see as the indie guys. Maybe it's different from what you see, but I mean, there's another whole group of guys out there that are wrestling for a hobby, that are not wrestling to get a job in WWE. There's ones that know they're being watched already. So they're already playing the game and they're already doing, then the guys that are open and vocal about what they do have nothing to hide. Chances are they're probably not going to be the guys hired just based on being open and with stories. I've told too many stories of picking up strippers or fucking running an escort agency or hanging out with porn stars or crazy shit that I've done. And then people are like, oh, he's a fucking loose cannon. He's a piece of shit, or he's a bad guy. It's like, I never hurt anybody. It's easy to take shots at me. I'm not an internet guy. I have no websites. I don't do my own Facebook. I'm not out there bitching on Twitter. I always thought I met you. I try to be nice to every human being I meet on the planet. Same thing when I was in jail. I try to pray and eat with people and take care of people and share with people and be conscientious that this is a really tough world to live in. And it's an ugly, nasty place, but you could look at it like that and be miserable all day, or you could try to find the highlights of everything that's out there. If you got something bad to say about somebody, I always try to find something good to say if I'm going to say something bad. And I'll say something bad first because I want to be remembered saying something good after. So the last thing that comes out of my mouth about somebody would be something good. But a lot of people aren't good listeners. So they hear just the beginning of something and it flashes. And all of a sudden they don't hear the rest of the conversation. So they hear Teddy Hart hooker. And it's like, well, if you realize prostitution is completely legal in Canada, you get a license to do it and you get a STD check every 2 weeks. So it's a business. And those girls make $200,000-$300,000 a year. If you're going to judge someone for having sex for money, like I say, then you're a fucking moron, because that's the oldest thing in the world. That's how people have survived. And that's the only way we procreate. And that's the only way guys, I think, can be tolerated by women, is if they give them some money to hear their bullshit. Because a lot of guys out there are headaches. And I say that ahead of time, like men as a species are vulgar and I say kind of like pigs, but there is nice guys out there too. And there's a lot of girls out there, same thing. You might be in one type of business, but that doesn't mean that you're anything but a lady and a respected woman and a business person, and that makes money and runs a business and takes care of her family and takes care of her animals. And I just think people judge way too much in this world about stuff they know nothing about, right? They just get a small story or some information that's secondhand or third hand, and then all of a sudden that's their decision and that's the judgment they have. And now you're being persecuted. I feel like a judge and jury has convicted me of guilty.
Okay, but here's the thing. Like, when I saw all of that, first and foremost, when someone is on drugs and they've had these addictions, that's not on you, right? You understand that. So in your last incident, as we call it, and by the way, I still have yet to go to Japanese Grill one day, but I really want to go. So that last incident, now, a grown woman has kids, okay? Or we think is a grown woman. That's reasonable to say.
3
you
kids.
have your kids and you leave your kids in a different country, right? To go pursue wrestling somewhere else. So that's the
Let me get this one thing straight. She was never supposed to be a wrestler. Otherwise, I would have left her in Calgary or Edmonton to train wrestling. Her whole point was she wanted to do MMA, which is a whole different ballgame. And we make money as agents for MMA because she can actually get a few fights. As an indie wrestler, she'll never get booked. She has no experience. It takes at least 2 years to get trained in wrestling. She was supposed to be an MMA fighter. That was the only reason we talked to her about anything to do with combat sports. Wrestling happened to be easy to float in. Oh, she's doing wrestling now because that's a story for the narrative. She never wanted to wrestle. Her dad used to wrestle. That was the only coincidence. That was her only thing, that her dad was an indie wrestler way back in the day in Calgary. That girl was there to box and do MMA and get punched in the face and fight for real. Otherwise, she would have never been down there. So,
so she made that choice. That's okay. She made that choice to leave Canada. Let me rephrase that. Leave her kids there, right? To go to a different country to train. Yeah. Now, being that you are part of the Hart family, people get seduced by that without you even doing much, I can imagine. Plus you're very charismatic. So I believe, and this is me, what pissed me off the most about that, with that flub, that Slobovian filmmaker, was this. They made it seem as though they're trying to say that you did something to her. She got out of jail, okay? When you get out of jail from drugs and whatever else there is, you could just go jump over to a different country, go to Cuba, go to Mexico or something, or get picked up by someone and something happens. Some people, when they get on drugs, they just go binge and they go missing for days. So I never thought that was on you. Huh?
They did a full investigation on her. When you're done, I'll tell you, they did a full investigation on her. And they knew from the day she went missing, about 3 weeks after that, or couple months after that, that I would never be involved in talking or seeing her, because it's really hard unless you're a fucking Houdini or Copperfield and you're able to be in two places at once and being videotaped at the same time, because they have me on video in one city working and doing something, and they don't even know the details of that. I'll tell you the details because I got permission.
I do want to know because this, again, I feel as though the filmmaker and that company needs to be held accountable, because you go out there interviewing people and not exposing the reality. And no one's trying to victim shame anyone. The victim in that would obviously have been you.
Of course. And
they've done everything to blame you.
And they're paying those girls, every one of them, thousands of dollars for something that happened 5 years ago. So they got no money then. They're now, hey, here's fucking $3,000 to badmouth your boyfriend, who you couldn't get a judge or jury to deal with any of your bullshit allegations. They said not guilty, and they charged them with contempt of court. So during that time is when I originally met that Sam Fiddler girl. And so she knew I was being charged. She knew, and she knew it was all bullshit. Same thing with Machiko. Machiko and Sam, they met in Dallas during WrestleMania. Machiko's the little independent girl who said I beat her up, and she was so traumatized, and she has 2 domestic violence on her record. We were pulled over in Oklahoma with 3 pounds of weed in our car because she kicked me in the face while we were driving, because she had a tantrum that she couldn't, it's just stupid. But she was very hot and cold because she took steroids. She wanted to jump on a couple cycles of steroids. And people don't realize every girl I dated ended up doing steroids, not because of me, because they wanted to get steroids. In girls, it changes their chemistry, and it gives them a totally different type of, I saw them with her when she wasn't on anything, real cool, mellow, smoked weed. When she was on testosterone, and it probably should have been a smarter coach about it, but it's hard to tell people what they want to do, especially if they've already heard it from other people before I met them. So Machiko had been in wrestling before I met her. So she's like, I wanted to do a cycle. I wanted to get lean. I want to get in better shape. I've met you. Let's take it seriously. So obviously I'm taking some steroids trying to get bigger, and I'm doing indie shows. I have no piss test, nothing so I don't have anything to worry about. I'm freely allowed to take what I want. Plus, I think back then I had a prescription for testosterone. So, I mean, I've been smart about doing it the right way. So I never got charged with, obviously I end up getting charged with that stuff later on anyway. But at the time and place, I thought I was pretty smart covering my ass on stuff. So I would always have a prescription. If I was carrying anything, I could quickly swallow it if it was, enough. But obviously, so Machiko and I have a huge falling out in right before the camera guys come down. And then they come down, and I tell them Machiko's pissed off that she's not going to be coming to Canada, we don't think, because she has a domestic violence on her record. And she doesn't want to go through the process of calling Canada and asking permission. So she makes us buy her airplane tickets, pay for her hotel, all of her stuff, and book her off of work so she can come to Canada. And that was what that fight was about. And I told her they don't show any of it. I said, you got to fucking watch your mouth. I said, someone's going to slap the shit out, because what she was doing was she was basically making claims that with these girls that she was wrestling with, that she didn't want to do a lot of stuff, and that she was my girlfriend, so she should be going over. And she was trying to push that on. And some of my friends were like, listen, you're not even from Texas, and Machiko's not really a good worker, and she's not going to go over because she's with you. Do you agree with that? And I said, no, I don't. I said she should pay her dues and have to fucking do it. You're the promoter. If you want her to job out. She's like, you're not protecting me, and you're making me lose matches. I'm better than these girls. I said, you don't go to training though. You thought because you fucked me, all of a sudden everything's just going to come to you, handed to you, and that's not the way it is. You need to train. I didn't learn how to wrestle because I'm Stu Hart's grandson. I learned how to wrestle because I spent fucking 20 years of gymnastics and diving and training and all these other things, cross training and doing, so I was safe and I was reliable. And it's a lot of work to become Harry Smith. It's a lot of work to become John Morrison or AJ Styles or Rey Mysterio Jr. Fucking these are like, she didn't understand the work that went into the wrestling, and she thought it was nepotism stuff type of thing where if she's with me, she gets to get a free pass. That didn't happen. The next day, the camera guys show up. She's living in a house for free. She's got no responsibilities. We're selling weed. And that's the only thing I give Machiko a lot of credit. She rode in a car with 40 pounds of weed in my car with me and her. And we took her car from here all the way to California, picked up a bunch of weed that was still on the stems. And it was still on the branches. I didn't even have time to cut it and dry it yet. I just went there. I knew my friend was changing locations. He's like, hey, I got all this extra weed sitting here right now. He's like, if you want to come pick it up. and fucking take it back, you can. And she jumped in the car and she balls to the wall, drove 40 hours each way or whatever it was. And we went and picked that up. Our car smelled so bad. We couldn't even hide it. We just drove. It was do or die. I'm like, listen, it's weed. I'm going to put my hands in God. And if we make it back, we make it back. So we made it back, and we did that twice. And the third time we drove to Colorado, she had a meltdown about this documentary and kicked me in the face with a pair of boots on while we were driving. And I pulled her out of the fucking car. I did. I grabbed her by her hair and I pulled her out of the fucking car. And I told her, I said, and the cops came. And they happened to see her throw something at me, and it looked like a fucking razor blade. What it was it was like a big silver tray we roll our weed on in the car. So she threw that, but it looked like a fucking weapon or something. So cops got called. We ended up getting it put in jail for 3 days. They never found the weed in the tires. They just found the weed that was in the litter box, underneath the litter box. So we got charged for that, and somehow those charges got dropped. I don't even know how it happened, but me and her went to court, and we had to get the cat out of the fuck. So at that stage, the relationship was starting to deteriorate. And I told the camera guys, I said, I'd like to get away from Montreal for a bit and get a break after she was not allowed in the country. So when she came, she flew all the way up. And now I'm like, this is on video. You made me look really bad the night before. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm stressed out. I've never left the country. This is my dream to come to Canada. I don't think I'm going to go, but I'm like, why didn't she just find out? We were willing to pay a lawyer. All you had to do is make 2 phone calls, and you would have been allowed to come in the country, because you didn't do any maintenance on that. You just took a chance and wasted my fucking money. And I was excited to have her come to Canada, meet my parents. We'd been dating for over a year at that time. She was going to see some of my other cats that I had in Canada, because at that stage I had half my cats. The other girls took the other half. So I had a sanctuary where I kept like 30 of my cats to still try to maintain my business. And of course, my wife and the ex-girlfriend took all of the best ones, all of the best breeders, the best mothers, and all the stud males. They took all of them. So I was left with all the mixes that I had started doing, Mancoons and Persians and Burmese and Persians, and I was trying to do a serval. Eventually started doing Bengals and Persians. And so I was mixing a lot of different ones. I started doing a Scottish fold, hairless Persian. So those are all mixes. They take years to do. Like, you can't just make a mix, because it takes like 3 or 4 breedings to get the mix to lose its nose. If you want a flat face for a Persian, or if you want certain colors, you have to breed certain colors, and you got to keep that cat locked in a room, because you can't have the other cats that are different color schemes coming into that room. Otherwise it'll fuck up the next. So it's a complicated process. And she got into the cat breeding with me, and that was one of the things I give her credit for. She still has 6 of my cats, Machico. I brought her down thousands of dollars, each Persians, each one. And because she wasn't smart about selling the cats to people, she ended up getting them all fixed. So you can think one Persian cat, usually $2,000 a pop. They have 3 to 5 per twice a year. That's 10 kittens a year. She has 3 or 4 mothers and 2 males. She probably could have made $20,000, $30,000 a year on those cats if she was smart. Michelle and Faye, I made $100,000 in 1 year selling Persian cats. So
wow, that's so good. I have an all black cat. So what if I wanted all black with like the white paws and the tuxedo? Is that a special type of breeding I have to do?
Everyone. The tuxedos, you can get a Persian tuxedo. One of my exes had one, but they're hard to find. You'd have to go to the breeders and look at the pictures of what they have in inventory. And I find a lot of those websites are fucking bullshit. I've been having a lot of problems trying to find Persian cat breeders that are reliable. But most of them, what I see now, they're pretty expensive. They're like $2,500 to $3,000 a cat. So when I was doing it, they were worth probably $1,000 a pop. Now they've gone up a lot. So that was another thing with me and her. I just thought it was wrong of her to act like I never did anything for her. She had nothing good to say, considering we broke up about 6 months after that whole situation happened. And then she came back to me 2 years after that. And she came back and it was hard to get a hold of her, because she didn't want to talk to me. She was really mad. And I said, I don't want to live my life as an enemy of somebody. I said, would you at least pick up the phone and talk to me? And I had Nick Gage call her, and I had a guy named Orlando call her, and a few of my friends called her. And I think Masada, I was trying to get him to get a hold of her, because he knew.
Did you say Masada also?
Yeah, Masada, okay. Another good friend of mine back in the day.
He works with me. Yeah, I know he is.
Really nice guy, a really nice guy too. And it was nice. And a guy she dated before me was Scott Summers, and he was another guy that was with Machiko. And when I met Machiko, I didn't know she was dating him, and she brought me to a show. So she picked me up and brought me to the show. He didn't even show up for the show because he thought there was heat between me and him. And she'd already I'm like, you didn't tell me this is a guy you're dating. This is a guy I'm wrestling. She's like, oh, we had a bad ending and a falling out. I'm like, you're bringing me into your drama. I'm like, I don't know anybody in Texas. This is my first month out here wrestling. And I'm hearing all these different stories and who she's been with and that she has a domestic violence on her record. And she lived with a guy named Darren who was with her, and he had a girlfriend or a wife. So she lived with another couple for a year, from what I was told, or something like along the line. So she was aware of a polyamorous relationship. She knew my wife owned an escort agency, and she knew my other wife was a porn star who did some prostitution, but she mostly did lesbian stuff and lesbian videos and stuff. That's how she made her money before I met her. So she had no problems with any of this until later. Now she's talking shit and judging everybody and saying they're pieces of shit and she hates them, and she never met them. And they were nice to her. And that's one of the reasons they pulled the plug on me, was because they said, the girl you're going to see is an ungrateful bitch. We just gave her a free cat. And she didn't even bother saying thank you to Michelle on the phone when they talked, because all the girls I date know each other. My wife knows my girlfriends. Those girls are all, I wouldn't say best friends, but they all communicate. They're all aware of each other. I don't lie to anybody. I don't keep secrets like that. So sometimes girls don't want to hear it. But to me, if I say it off the hop, you can't hold me responsible for something I lied about if I didn't lie. And so that was sort of it was awkward sometimes, but at the same time, the truth will set you free. And if you warn a girl off the beginning, she's accepted that. Usually they're pretty, fair about that situation. My wife was with me for 6 years and a great lady most of the time, but she had done a lot of drugs, and before I met her, and because she had a lot of money. She didn't give a fuck. Her dad was a biker, and he had passed away, and she'd basically been protected, and they were very powerful, the bikers in Canada, especially, and I'm friends with a lot of them too. And so it was a good group of people for me to be with, to show them that I was safe and I was someone that their daughter could hang out with. So I kept her clean, and she was doing really well for years. And then she said she had met a couple clients that were guys that are big money clients, and they wanted to buy her out for the year. And would I care? And I said, well, no, I've met a girl in Texas. And I said, Michelle wants to go to California and starts to grow weed. I've been growing weed for 20 years, right? So I have and this is all on video. I have all this shit on video for the camera guys. So I've been growing in California. I have a few big warehouses down there. They make some significant cash, but I mean, you're splitting it between 3 people. So the money's obviously not as good as it should be, but still, if we're making 300,000 or 400,000 a year on this type of stuff, and they have their own dispensary, and they have their own license, and they have their own co-op, not just a grow up, but a co-op. So they have a multi-level operation, which is like 3 or 4 farms or 6 farms altogether. Each one has a plant count and stuff. So I videotaped this extensively, so everyone in Calgary or Edmonton knew that I would go to California to do my marijuana business, because in Canada, marijuana was still somewhat illegal. So the only place you could really go and smoke and have a license was California. You're talking 15 years ago, 10 years ago, up to, and there wasn't all these other legal states at the time. So she went down there, and she wanted to stay down there. So Michelle was going to go live in California, and I was going to start doing more wrestling stuff with Machiko. And Faye was going to take one of her clients who was paying her $250,000 to buy her out, like just buy her up for the year, so she doesn't have to do any other calls. And she said, I like the guy. He's an older guy. I just want to get out of the business. After the car accident, she wasn't moving around so well. She had a bad car accident. Of course, I take care of her. No credit for that. I stuck with her. Michelle stuck with her. We ran our business while she was in the hospital and took care of everything she had. So when she came back, she was fine. But she could never go into her house again. Her house had all these stairs. She couldn't walk up the stairs. So she ended up just living at the hotel. And so now we have a hotel. We have 5 rooms at the hotel. We have 4 different girls that live in the hotel that all work the hotel. And they're making a lot of money, these girls. My wife made probably 300,000 that year cash off calls. Most of her calls are truckers in the morning, from 5 a.m. till fucking 8 a.m. And those are her
truckers?
Truckers
would pay that kind of money.
Truckers have that kind of money in Canada. I mean, what's $350, right? $500 for an hour, I think.
Oh, I thought it was like $1,000 an hour. I'm thinking like high end. Okay, never mind. My bad.
Those kind of prices, because the competition is different there, because everyone's based on a price based on the escort agency that you work for. Backpage wasn't a lot. There wasn't Backpage back then. There wasn't Craigslist. So
yeah.
You call an agency to get a girl, and then the agency would find a dispatcher. The dispatcher would find the girl closest to you and a driver. So my job was a driver. I never wanted to be a pimp. I didn't want any money from girls. I thought they made their money. You keep it. I make my money selling cats. You guys introduced me to all these clients. Half the clients that bought cats were guys that were fucking girls that worked for my wife. Those are all guys. Yeah, because they go into the suites, and they see these girls twice a month, sometimes twice a week, depending on how much money they have. And they see the kittens. So they want to buy a kitten, and then they bring the kitten back to hang out with the mother when they fucking make their calls. So I had some guys that had been coming for 2-3 years. They had a 2-year-old cat that they bought off me 2 years before for $1,000, and then they go see the girl. And the girl and the mother cat still remembers her son, because the son comes every week with the dad to see his, to see the girl. So it's like, and these guys are paying extra money to dress them up. And I have a clothing line and I make outfits. So sometimes I'm making money on guys wanting to get an outfit, or the girls are skinning them for, because they all have their own deals. And I don't interfere. I've never talked to half their clients except if I met them in passing when they're walking through a hallway, and then sometimes I would do couples calls, and my wife and I would she'd have like guys that didn't want to cheat on their wife. So they'd call and say, hey, my wife caught me cheating, or my wife caught me picking up an escort. She wants to be involved, or if she's getting a divorce, can you hook us up with a couples call? So I do some couples calls, and that was significant money, because that's a different call. So we'd both make $1,000 for a couples call, maybe 2 hours. And that was so, and they were like, oh, well, you're making money in this now too. And I'm like, guys, I've done maybe 10 couples calls my whole life. I did this to make it easy for you guys. And I'm usually stuck with some fucking girl that's, not the best looking, and her husband's happy to get fucking me to take care of his wife for 2 hours while he's fucking having fun with one or two of the girls that are the girls I always hired were in immaculate, clean, and in great shape, and always going to the gym. I don't put up with that shit. They're in the gym every day. There's no drugs in the house. The only drug they could do would be marijuana. And again, because they're all in shape, every single one of them tried steroids, and that's where their mood swings. I would account for a lot of the mood swings being like that. But if you tell one girl something, the other girl wants to do the same thing. And if you tell one girl she charged you with rape, all of a sudden the next girl's like, oh, that's terrible. How could they do that? Well, when they get pissed off, what do you think their next move is? All of a sudden, Machigo 5 years later is like, oh, well, he tried to rape me. I didn't want to have sex with him. He did this to me. He beat me up. It's like, you had 5 years to say that. He never said a fucking thing until all of a sudden your career is over in wrestling. You got nothing going on. You got sour grapes, and I didn't take you back. And you want to complain to the world about something I did. And then that's like, okay, well, that's fine. And then, but when they start lying, like Machigo said I had her passport. That never happened. That was a lie. So they made that so I looked like I was trapping that girl in fucking Florida. She was down there. She was living in a mansion for a month, and she was going in and out of the mansion and waking up the owner of the house at night with a brand new Jaguar that we gave her to use if she was doing MMA. Once we found out she wasn't training, she was going to bars, trying to be a stripper again and do landscaping. We said, we're not fucking sponsoring you. You're 30, you're 26 years old. You have 3 kids. Go home or find someone else to take care of you out here. We're finished. And I took the car and went back home. When I took the car, I found her passport in the car. I drove all the way back to Florida, from fucking Dallas to Florida. The next 2 weeks, I had to go back and forth anyway. So when I got back, I saw her. I said, here's your passport. Gave it to her. If she'd been arrested twice, how the fuck did they identify her the first time? John Doe is what happens if you walk in a place, you get arrested. No fingerprints on file, and she's not from that country. So how would Florida know who she was to identify her unless she had her ID and her passport? Obviously, she had her passport. It also doesn't take very much sense to go to the embassy and say that you've lost your passport. It's an emergency. I need to go back to my family. I have 3 little kids at home. She would have got a passport within 3 to 5 days. She never called her parents and asked to go home. Never called her sister. Not one of those interviews or messages said, I'm coming home. I miss you. Or how are my kids doing? I miss my kids. I'm such a good mother. She didn't want to be a mother anymore. The last kid she had, she got septic. They cut her. She had 3 C-sections. The last C-section she had, they cut a piece of her stomach lining, and it got infected. So when they sewed her back up, a piece of her intestine was fucking nicked. So her bowels leaked into her stomach. She had to get an emergency surgery after that. She didn't even think she'd live. She was so stressed out and tired. She said both the husbands she had, her boyfriend she had, were abusive, and that she did drugs with them. Could we help her out? 3 kids. I'm trying to be nice to her. 3 kids, thinking this is going to be an opportunity. I'm a MMA fighter. I've been training MMA. My dad had me doing boxing. I went and talked to her dad. Her dad said he'd been training her since she was a kid, all this. And she could fight. She was a tough chick. So I'm like, fuck, dude, she might go in and actually bang it out with some of these girls. They make 30, 50,000 a fight. I know people in UFC. I know people in Bellator. I know the US top team guys. I'm friends with Kenny Lester. He's got a bunch of friends down there. So if we bring her down there and she does well at MMA, awesome. It's my first student training MMA, and I wanted to train MMA because I thought the wrestling's fun, but I wanted to get some people doing other stuff. She never did shit. The whole point of that should have been fucking made as she doesn't want to do what she's required to do to get sponsored. And if she's not going to do what she's supposed to do, then why would we continue to pay for her? She's basically holding us hostage. Like, oh, you're going to pay for my house. You're going to pay for my car. You're going to pay for my fake tits. You're going to pay for my food. And I'm going to fucking sit here and go fuck bikers at the fucking local bars and drive around in $100,000 car and wake up the owner of the fucking house. The owner is a lawyer, like 60 years old, said we could stay at his house. His son was training with me. And she's in like, a beautiful wintergreen property in Florida, and gated communities. You can't go in or out of the property without seeing the guard at the front, and they make a call. So every time she goes out, she comes back, she wakes the owner up after midnight, and he's wondering, what's this girl doing at his house who doesn't have any bills? Why is she out till 3 in the fucking morning every night when she's supposed to be training? Called my dad and called a few of my friends and said, this girl's not serious. We took her down to Chasen. I said, you got a place for her to stay? He said, yeah, I'll get her a place to stay. She got kicked out of there within 2 weeks or 3 weeks of there. And they just breeze over that. Then she gets arrested not once, but twice. You tell me, if you're arrested in fucking the States for anything, the first person they should call is Canada, and they should escort you to the border, and they take you out of the country. They extradite you. First time you're arrested. The second time, they should have taken her out. So if you want to go back and blame anybody, blame the people that arrested her not once, but twice. If you want to do an investigation, then someone should have pulled the cameras. I've seen where she left, and imagine that headache. And if you know me, I'm in another fucking state and another country, because I was in Mexico and I was in California at the time. I was dating a girl who worked with Homeland Security. Her mom was working with Homeland Security. I've never been able to say this because I had to ask them permission because it was part of a major investigation. So I asked them, I said, can I at least tell my side of the story now, where this is the reason I said I was never a suspect? And this is the reason the cops said I was never a suspect. So when everyone that's out there doing this witch hunt, you're asking this question: if I was never a suspect, then why the fuck is there a conversation, let alone a documentary, about me maybe being a murderer of some fucking mother of 3 who we tried to help out? And not one fucking positive thing said about me or my career, or 6 years of trying to rehab my life or fix my life or take accountability. I spent a year in jail during COVID, 24-hour confinement. No commissary, no fucking books.
Why were you there? I totally forgot. Why were you in jail for the year? I'm so sorry to cut you off.
So what happens if you get charged in Texas, you're on probation after that. I had some charges in Texas here. So after 5 years of probation, I moved my probation from Texas to Philadelphia. During COVID, I was dating Maria Manic. Maria and I were driving from city to city to city for all of her Ring of Honor bookings. I had some steroids in the car and some weed in the car, and I had a lot of money on me. So when I got pulled over, and I gave a homeless guy some Wendy's, but it's a hand-to-hand transaction. And in Virginia, I guess a lot of the ways they do drug deals is the guy will act like he's coming from a drive-through restaurant, and he'll hand the guy a bag like he's giving. So they check the bag. Obviously, it's fries and a fucking hamburger. They don't find anything, but they search my car. I tell them ahead of time I have marijuana, I have a prescription, I have a license from Pennsylvania to smoke. They said, doesn't matter. This is Virginia. That's possession. You have more than a certain amount of money. That's distribution. You have, and then I had a bottle of steroids. So they got me on that, had my name on it with a prescription. They said, doesn't matter. They said, I have 2 passports. That's a fucking violation because they thought I had a fake passport, which I didn't. So that had like 6 new charges during COVID in Virginia. It's really strict. And they confiscated my money and my car and my cats, because I got arrested with the cats in the car. So I had my cats with me because we were traveling state to state to state. So I had 4 cats in the car with me at the time. So basically that situation, you don't get bond in Virginia. You get an ankle monitor. So while you're waiting in jail, you got to get a place and you got to get a residence, and you have to have somebody from the courts go to the house and they zone the house out. Because your ankle monitor, you cannot leave your zone. If you leave your zone, it beeps. They send the fucking cops to your house right there. You're arrested for leaving their property line. You can't take your garbage out. You can't walk your dog. You can't go to the store unless you call them and get permission. And during COVID, everything was closed. So when I went to jail, it was like 2 months of just sitting there waiting. And finally, Maria was nice enough to get a place in Virginia, which we didn't live in. We lived in Florida at the time. I had to get a house there, 6-month lease, and wait. And while I'm waiting, there's no phone calls, and probation's closed in Pennsylvania because of COVID. So I couldn't call them to tell them what happened. It's a violation. You violate probation, they send you back to where your original charges were, Texas. So now I'm back in Texas with these new charges. I'm on probation for 6 years or 5 years. If you violate while you're on probation, they generally give you all of that time now as jail time. So now I'm facing 5 full years in jail. I've already done 4.5 years probation. So now I'm going to do another 5 years. That's what it's looking at. So in Virginia, I got really lucky. I got two great lawyers. And then so my lawyers went in and they fought it, and they beat everything. And they got me a 1 year, 1 year supervision or 1 year something transfer probation in Virginia. And then you got to move. So then Texas has to take me back, though, because now Texas is going to violate me for the probation violation. So that's the 5 years plus Virginia. I beat that, went back to Texas, and Tyson Kidd was nice enough at that time. There was some significant lawyer and things that were needed to be done, and my Aunt Ellie and a few people stepped up, and they made sure whatever the lawyer needed at the time. And my lawyer was really good. It was supposed to be like $50,000 that they wanted, because I was friends with the girl from Homeland Security and her mom, and it's a small community here. They said, listen, we'll do it for fucking basically nothing, like a couple $1,000. Like, it was under $2,000. It should have been. So he went to court and fought all of this. He turned out to be very good friends with the judge from years ago. He was on her campaign when she got hired, my lawyer. So he said, I trust the guy. He's a good guy. I talk to him all the time. He's a Christian, believes in God. And I know people that are guilty, and I know people that aren't. He's not a meth head. I can tell. He's an athlete. You don't just do meth, quit, start, stop. You either are or you're not. He says he's not a drug addict. I can see that in him, and I'm going to vouch for him. So he made a deal with the lawyer, and they gave me they said, listen, we're just going to give you the year you've lost, added that, plus the year you have left. So you got 2 years probation again, finish it, and everything's back to normal. So I was like, fuck, dude, that's a miracle. I was facing another 7 to 10 years in jail. I'm facing 20 originally. Now I'm facing 6. I got that beat. Then now I'm back 5 years later, facing another 5 to 7 years in jail. I beat that. Now I have to wait to see if I can finish this probation, but now I got to live in Texas again. So after 6 months of being in Texas, I met a lady named Brenda here, and she's been taking care of me, and got all my taxes done, got all my all my outfits made. I got really organized, thinking that, I'm here, I'm at an ankle monitor, I got to take these special classes every day. I had to do 6 months of classes every day, online classes for my probation. And you can't fail a piss test. Every 2 weeks, you got to go up and piss. And I did this for 6 years, all through all this shit. Never got any credit. Was wrestling while I was on probation. While I was a fugitive, I was wrestling for people. Now I beat all the charges. I have everything set up. I thought my life might come back to normal. I can't get a fucking booking anywhere because this documentary came out and just smeared the shit out of me.
I hope you're enjoying the ride on Crazy Train with Jasmine St. Clair podcast. So if you are, do me a huge, huge favor. Please go ahead. Go on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, but Apple's great. Give me a nice rating and review. Send me a screenshot, and I promise you, I will send you a special goodie bag. So please rate and review Crazy Train with Jasmine St. Clair podcast. And in exchange for that, once I see the DM with the review and your name and address, I will get those gift bags out to you. I'm not going to tell you what's in it.